welcome back to another episode of the Lonely Liberal Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Zankin, and I'm so happy to have you on this lovely Sunday, a nice May day. Hope your May has started off without too many allergies, no matter where you are. We got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about the major news stories of this last week. Listeners will notice that it's just me, not with Rick, which we usually have Rick and I do the roundup, but Rick isn't feeling well. He's on the injured reserve list for the coming week. Wish him well, but the show must go on, as they say. So we're going to bang out a little bit of a news roundup here because I know a lot of you rely on it. For the new listeners, how's it going? How you doing? Make sure you like and subscribe. Appreciate that. But without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, so like every week since this war has started, there's some updates on Iran. The main one that I think you should know about are the following. I guess the main ones. One of them is you may have heard of us talk last week about this thing called Project Freedom. What is that? So that's the U.S.'s effort to ferry vessels through the Strait of Hormuz because, they're trying to protect them. Interestingly, that has paused. And the reason for it pausing, Trump has said it was because of, great progress towards negotiations and blah, 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 blah. But actually, the real reason, according to NBC, is that Saudi Arabia was furious that this Project Freedom was launched without any consultation because they wanted to do this Pakistani-mediated diplomacy, which, of course, didn't include some sort of U.S. shuttle system. So what they did, Saudi Arabia that is, they barred U.S. military aircraft from flying out of Prince Sultan Air Base, so basically through Saudi airspace, and that literally ruined the entire logistics of everything. So the way it was going to work was that being a transit site. So when they closed that, literally the Project Freedom thing couldn't happen. So it's a sign that even Saudi Arabia is kind of sick of the U.S.'s nonsense / terrible communication. And again, that's when... that's what happens when your diplomacy is run by some dude's blood sugar levels. On that note, and this is one of the more interesting stories that came out this week about Iran, was The Atlantic reported that Trump is, quote-unquote, bored with the war. Apparently, after Venezuela, he was convinced that this would be another Venezuela, so they would just take out the Ayatollah. The people of Iran would be happy, and, that would be it, and probably take oil, if we're being honest. I mean, that was very, he was not shy from hiding. That's why he did what he did in Venezuela. Now, of course, that isn't what happened. And the initial intel assessments say that Iran can endure at least another 4 months of this blockade or whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, I mean, $100 billion later and many, many dead, this is clearly not another Venezuela. It's more like a Vietnam. So this is no good. And again, just shows you how little Trump listens to advice of foreign policy experts and security experts and stuff like that, because anyone who's studied this stuff at all, I mean, I've told people, you guys in the past, my undergrad and grad was international relations. And so this is stuff that you do with Poli-Sci 101, IR 101, which is do these little war game exercises. And what has happened so far in Iran is exactly what they teach you, in freshman classes. So clearly Trump wasn't listening to anyone who knew anything about this stuff, obviously. And this kind of reporting shows it. The last kind of Iran thing, I mean, I guess you could get it kind of to the side, but it's effectively the same, is Marco Rubio visited the Pope in the Vatican this week. He visited Pope Leo. They had a 45-minute closed-door meeting at the Apostolic Palace. I don't know how you say that. But yeah, this is the first meeting between Pope Leo and a Trump cabinet official, I think in over a year or nearly a year. And obviously Trump has been fighting with the Pope over the last couple of months, calling him weak on crime and whatnot. So big drama. Rubio gave the Pope a crystal football with the State Department seal. And the Pope gave Rubio a pen made out of an olive branch. So a little on the nose there, but it's pretty obvious that the Pope wants peace, which, I mean, I can't imagine that anyone wouldn't want peace, but clearly they do. Little bit of a reminder that there are 1.4 billion people who really care about what the Pope has to say. So Trump is by no hiding, there's no shame here in hiding it. Trump is still fighting with Catholics, and it hasn't been resolved, even though the American attention span has seemed to let it go. The other big news this week, you could put it in a bucket, which is we could call it like the redistricting wars, aka gerrymandering. For those who don't know what that means, basically gerrymandering, which actually started in Massachusetts, is the practice of politicians redrawing the political districting maps with intention to consolidate their specific political party in the region, because that's how the House works, like Congress works, is they represent different little political districts. So if you draw them where all like the Democrats live or where all the Republicans live, then you obviously increase the odds of you being reelected, or increasing the odds of there being more Republican or Democrat representatives in Congress. So this has been going on for a long, long time. It's obviously horrible. There's examples of blue states doing it. There's examples of red states doing it. But this recent wave, which is obviously highly important with the midterms this year, completely started in Texas last year. Listeners will have heard us talk about it a lot, but it was very bizarre because the gerrymandering / redistricting usually happens on the decade, because it is coincided with the census, because it's supposed to be just effectively what it's supposed to be is just them genuinely reflecting where people live. And so if a population shift happens, they can redraw the maps to, more effectively represent people. That's what it's supposed to be. Obviously, per just a second ago, that isn't what's happening. But usually this happens mid-decade. So what happened was Trump basically publicly asked the governor of Texas, Abbott, to redo the maps because the Republicans, in his own words, deserve to have more seats. They immediately complied. Actually, this is where, James Tallarico, the Democrat, got kind of popular because he was very outspoken. Remember, the Texas Democrats fled the state and stuff like that. Didn't really do anything. They ended up passing it. And a bunch of other conservative states have also done it. You have Missouri, you have Florida, you have all these different states. And California then did it as a response, kind of counterweight it as the Democrats, and so did Virginia. Now, the difference, not only just in terms of the president asking for it, between what California and Virginia did comparatively to what the Republican states have been doing, is that in all of the cases of the Republican states, they just passed it. The state government just passed it. Whereas in the Democratic states, they literally put it to a vote, a referendum, and the populace voted on, should we or should we not redraw these maps? So both in California and Virginia, the people voted, and they said, yes, we want to redistrict. Unfortunately for the Democrats, the Virginia State Supreme Court vetoed the Virginia one on the basis that the timing was incorrect, because the way Virginia works is very complicated. There's multiple elections for the same technical election, and if early voting starts, then the Supreme Court said, well, the early voting had started and it was for the preview election. If it's confusing, don't worry about it. All that you need to know is that the Supreme Court at the state level vetoed it because of the timing of when the referendum was passed. So that's a big blow to the Democrats. I mean, you could argue, should the Democrats follow the courts? The Republicans don't, right? I mean, they should do something. I don't know what it is exactly legal. I'm sure I would love to talk to a legal expert about it, but it isn't good. On top of that, and we talked about this last week, with the Supreme Court, now the federal Supreme Court, saying that the Voting Rights Act, which said you have to make sure representation is not racist, effectively. So I'm paraphrasing here because this stuff is complicated, but that was the whole point of the Voter Rights Act. That got repealed because of the Supreme Court ruling last week, obviously pretty bad. And then literally what happened immediately was all these southern states carving up major cities to add more seats for Republicans. So the big one was in Tennessee. They repealed the state's 56-year-old prohibition on mid-decade redistricting. So again, like I said, this is usually legal, and then passed a new map immediately. The governor, Bill Lee, signed it literally the same day. And the big thing was that the map really focused on Memphis, which is Tennessee's only majority black city, so the only city that has more black people than white people, into 3 districts. And what that does is, again, spread Democrat voters into rural Republican districts, so that way that it kind of dilutes the voice of the people of Memphis. And this is bad. Nashville also was split into 5 districts. By doing this, you now have guaranteed more Republican states. And other southern states are absolutely going to do this now that they have the pass to throw out maps that were meant to not be racist. I hope this makes sense, but all in all, Tennessee is the 9th state to redraw maps mid-decade ahead of the midterms. This is completely unprecedented and absolutely terrible. This literally was illegal 2 weeks ago, and now they're doing it. So that just shows you how important the Supreme Court is. On to the ballroom. So this week, the Judiciary Chair Grassley, he released his $71.8 billion reconciliation bill to fund ICE and the Border Patrol. So remember, the shutdown for the Department of Homeland Security ended last week, but they hadn't had the funding sorted for ICE and the CBP. So this bill is that, to fund it through 2029. Unbelievably tucked inside this bill was a $1 billion request for security adjustments and upgrades related to the ballroom. So not only are they trying to use taxpayer money for it, which they promised they wouldn't, that's more than double the entire $400 million projected ballroom cost. So this is crazy. If you're curious about the ICE CBP split, it's $38 billion to ICE, $26 billion to the border, and $5 billion in terms of just discretionary funds. So that's insane. That's just absolutely insane. The promise for the ballroom was that it would cost taxpayers nothing. It would all be privately funded. It's ridiculous. So it went from $200 million to $400 million, now to $1 billion. You know, they're calling it a bait and switch. It's literally just robbery. I mean, there's no other way to do it. You can dress it up with some sort of, window dressing of what's going on here. But I don't think you understand how much $1 billion is. I mean, you might, but this is a huge difference. It's just an absolute joke. In kind of good news, if you're anti-tariff, the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that Trump's broad 10% global tariff under everybody was unlawful, right? So that means you just can't do that, which is good. So this is the second major court decision that has kind of stalled Trump's ability to just do tariffs whatever he wants. That's good. I'm sure they'll try again because Trump is stubborn. Interestingly, this week, ABC filed a petition with the FCC because the FCC was throwing a fit at the ABC for an episode of The View, the ladies on The View. So what had happened was James Tallarico, the Democrat running for U.S. Senate in Texas, now he won the primary, remember, he was on The View, and the FCC said that that was not fair because they haven't had enough conservative politicians on. It's wild. So ABC said this is an unprecedented, beyond the commission's authority, and counterproductive. It is important to remember that the chair of the FCC, Brandon Carr, was a author of Project 2025, one of the authors of specifically this stuff, the being an FCC head. So shocker, he's in charge, and shocker, he's trying to limit airtime for Democrats. Speaking of Democrats, Kamala Harris was in the news this week, and she said something that I enjoyed, which was that she told donors privately, apparently, that she has no problem with the public airing of the DNC's 2024 autopsy. Now, many of you may not know this, but after they lost the election, they did a huge study on why. It was a 200-page report that was commissioned in February last year, and included over 300 interviews across 50 states. And basically was trying to figure out why didn't you want to vote for Kamala. And according to people who have read the document, a big part was Kamala's, position on Israel, which isn't a surprise to any liberal-leaning audience members here, or frankly, Republican audience members here. It's funny, DNC chair Ken Martin has said he would release it publicly. That's funny. It's been over a year and he hasn't. It's funny, a lot of the times people talk about the DNC being bad, and the DNC can sometimes, I think, in people's mind, become this kind of like mysterious octopus with its tendrils everywhere, and you hear like, they don't want this, they're gonna run this. Well, if you're looking for a name, it's the DNC chair, which is Ken Martin. I mean, he claims that, why would we do this? This is his direct quote. If releasing it wouldn't help us win, it's a distraction from our core mission. And there was no smoking gun. I don't know. I mean, also another interesting thing about this report is it apparently doesn't examine whether Biden should have stayed in the race or dropped out sooner, or whether Harris was the right replacement. I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious to anyone in this current time, maybe not back then, but at least now, it seems pretty crazy to think that what they did was right in terms of letting Biden linger around as long as he did. In terms of releasing files, the Pentagon this week released a bunch of UFO files, 162 files to be precise, from the FBI, from the State Department, and NASA. It's funny, this was ordered release after Obama said on a podcast that aliens were real. We played it on the show a few months ago, but yeah, for those who haven't heard it, they basically said, oh, aliens are real, but I don't know if they've been here. But anyway, all these things came out. Nothing really is interesting here. There's some funny looking photos and videos that are really blurry and hard to understand. Critics, including me, have said this is more just Epstein cover-up crap. It's so funny. They're releasing UFO files. They're going to the moon. They're starting wars. They're doing anything they can but to talk about Epstein. And yeah, I think this is another one of those backfires where it's so obvious a distraction that, it's just getting embarrassing. They actually had a X-Files themed website you can click to too, which is crazy. Some other interesting pieces of news. This one is so dumb. They've literally created a 22-foot golden statue of Trump, which was unveiled at the Trump National Doral, which is in Miami. It's not Mar-a-Lago. I've seen on the news the report is Mar-a-Lago. It's actually not. It's in Miami. And it depicts Trump with his fist raised, the fight, fight, fight pose. And it was sculpted by Alan Cottrell, who actually has sculpted 16 presidents. It was originally bronze, but of course they couldn't help but put gold statue stuff on it. And what's funny, it was funded by the crypto investors who did the coins. So wonder how that happened. It's so funny to do this. It's like, to not only have a bunch of this is the craziest thing. So not only was it just crazy to make a giant gold statue of yourself when the economy is doing terrible and prices are rising and there's war and gas prices are $6. It's just awful. So out of touch, add to the very long list of the let them eat cake moments from the Trump administration. The craziest thing about this was that the dedication ceremony was led by an evangelical pastor, Mark Burns, of a group called the Pastors for Trump, and Trump's informal spiritual advisor. You may have seen pictures of them. And the statue was draped in this white and blue thing. It's just so crazy. And it's just so funny because the Bible literally has this whole thing about the golden calf and worshiping false idols. And it's just these people just are so not actually religious. It's not even funny. It's mind-blowing. I mean, he's fighting with the Pope. He's making gold statues that these people are worshiping. They're doing sermons to Pulp Fiction. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. It's the embarrassment of this stuff just it knows no ends in terms of how fake religious they are. Because it's just, anyone with actual, faith should, I hopefully know that this is just absolutely insulting. And what I wanted to end this week in terms of insulting was Trump had more kids at the White House this week. And every single time he has children around him, you just see what he will tell these kids. And of course, this week he rambled about nukes in front of a bunch of children. Figured I'd play the clip because it is ridiculous. So take a listen here.
We're breaking records in every way, and I know it's too bad, but I had to do it. We can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. You might be too young for this. I don't know if I want. They probably know. They probably know better than most people. But you can't let a bunch of lunatics have a nuclear weapon, or the world would be in trouble. The world would be in trouble. So we just hit records on the Dow. It was supposed to be done in 5 or 6 years. Somebody said it couldn't be possible to reach 50 on the Dow, and I reached 50 in the first year. And then I reached 7,000, and by the way, just set a new record. The S&P just set a new record, set much higher, 7,500. But they said even harder than 50 on the Dow is getting to 7,000 on the S&P. We did that by the end of the first year, all before the end of the first year. Gary, so think of that. They said we couldn't do it in 4 years, and we did it at the end of the first year. And then, you ever have this? And then I called all my people, and I said, we just set every record in the book. The economy is going great. I ended 8 wars. Nobody else ever ended a war. And the person that won the Nobel Prize, Maria.
All right, and you get the deal. It's just so funny listening to him talk like a children, because he sounds like a child. Of just this like, you can't have Iran have a nuclear weapon. The Dow is up. I can't believe the Dow. I ended 8 wars. I should have won the Nobel. Like, it's just this vomit of just self-praise and stuff. And he says, Gary, I don't know if you know, Gary is like a 7-year-old. So an unbelievable moment that is on top of many unbelievable moments of children frowning at a grown man who is present. And that's our show, folks. Thank you so much for listening today. If you like the show, remember, tell someone about it. You can give it a review too, but share it around. That's really helpful, so I would appreciate that. But we'll be back on Wednesday with our normal programming. But until then, take it easy. See ya. Bye.